Have you ever poured your entire soul into something, only to watch someone else take the credit? Not just take the credit, but wear it like a crown, bask in the applause, and then, when asked about the work, have the audacity to call you a function, like a photocopier or a keyboard. My name is Arya, and I was the typist. I was also the creative mind, the architect, the ghost in the machine of the Midnight Gardener series. This isn't just a story about getting even. This is a story about reclaiming a soul. Before we get into it, just let me know I'm not the only one who has felt this way by giving this video a like. It helps to know I'm not just screaming into the void. The end began on a Tuesday, under the hot, sterile lights of a television studio. I wasn't there, of course. I was never there. I was in my small apartment, the one paid for by my ghostwriting fee, with the windows overlooking a brick wall. My laptop was open, a fresh document staring blankly back at me, the cursor blinking with a kind of mocking patience. This was supposed to be the first day of brainstorming for Book 4, Gemma's fourth book, my fourth descent into the creative shadows. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me. It was a link from Marcus, my editor at the publishing house, the only person there who knew the truth, the only one who ever looked at me with something other than polite indifference. The link had no message, just the cold, blue text of a URL. I knew it was from Gemma's latest press tour for Book 3, The Crimson Bloom, a book that had just won the prestigious Silver Quill Award, an award with her name on it, an award sitting on her marble mantelpiece, an award for words she hadn't written. I clicked the link. The video loaded. There she was, Gemma. Her hair was a perfect cascade of blonde, her dress was a shade of blue that cost more than my rent, and her smile was a weapon. She was luminous, a star created by my thoughts, polished by a public relations team, and powered by my silence. The interviewer, a man with teeth too white to be real, leaned in conspiratorially. He asked her the question, the one she always got, the one she always fumbled. He said, "Gemma, your fans are just dying to know about your writing process. It's so unique, so visceral. How do you do it?" In the past, she'd spout some pre-packaged nonsense we'd rehearsed. She'd talk about lighting a special candle, or listening to a specific playlist, or taking long, pensive walks. Lies. All of it. The real writing process was me, in my pajamas, drinking stale coffee at 2 in the morning, wrestling with a plot point, until I wanted to cry. The real writing process was the back-and-forth emails between me and Marcus, refining a sentence a dozen times. The real writing process had nothing to do with Gemma, but this time she did something different. She laughed. It wasn't a small, polite chuckle. It was a full, throaty laugh, thrown back, as if the very question was absurd. The interviewer looked taken aback. The audience tittered, unsure if they were in on the joke. Then she leaned forward, her eyes glittering with a kind of cruel amusement, and she said the words that broke the world. She said, "Oh, darling, the process is everything. The creative mind is everything. The typist is just a function." She winked. The typist is just a function. The words didn't just hang in the air. They landed in my small apartment, like a physical blow. The typist, not a writer, not a partner, not even a collaborator, a function, an appliance, a thing you plug in to get a job done. The camera cut to the interviewer, who was now laughing along with her, completely charmed by her dismissive wit. The screen was filled with her perfect laughing face, and in that moment, she wasn't just taking credit for my work. She was erasing my existence. She was reducing my art, my sweat, my soul to a mechanical action. The blinking cursor on my empty document suddenly felt like a judgment. For 3 years I had been a ghost, and in one sentence, she had confirmed that to her, I wasn't even a ghost. I was just the machine the ghost used. That was the last straw. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I closed the laptop. The brainstorming for Book 4 was over before it began. It was never about the money, you have to understand. It was about the story. It was about the world I had built from nothing. And she had just called me the janitor. The fallout wasn't a storm. It was a quiet, cold pressure change in the atmosphere of my own life. The day after the interview, My body felt like it was moving through water. Every action was slow, deliberate, muffled. I re-watched the clip a dozen times, not out of masochism, but with a kind of detached forensic curiosity. I watched the way her lips formed the word typist, the casual flick of her wrist as she dismissed me, the easy laughter that followed. It was a masterclass in public assassination, and I was the chalk outline nobody could see. I didn't cry. The time for that was long past. Instead, a kind of glacial calm settled in my bones. It was the calm that comes after the fever breaks, the silence after the explosion. It was the terrible clarifying peace of knowing that something was irrevocably over. My loyalty, my misplaced, pathetic, desperate loyalty to the characters in the Midnight Gardener series, had been the chain holding me in place. I had told myself that I was protecting them, protecting the integrity of the world I'd built. What a lie. I was protecting Gemma's brand. I was protecting the publisher's investment. I was a willing participant in my own erasure. And for what? A steady paycheck, and the secret, bitter satisfaction of seeing my words in print, even with someone else's name on the cover. I got up from my desk and walked to my bookshelf. There they were, the Holy Trinity, and the Silent Seed, the Shadow Orchid, the Crimson Bloom. 3 beautiful hardcovers, their jackets gleaming under the low light of my lamp. Her face smiled back at me from the author photo on the back flap of each one. Gemma, standing in a pristine garden, looking thoughtful, a pen held delicately in her hand, as if it were a scepter. It was a lie within a lie. She probably didn't even know which end of the pen to use. I pulled the Shadow Orchid from the shelf. It was the second book, the one that had catapulted the series from a surprise hit to a cultural phenomenon. It was the book that had nearly broken me. I remembered the nights, the endless nights, trying to untangle the central mystery. I remembered the breakthrough, happening not on a pensive walk through a garden, but at 3:30 a.m. in the fluorescent glare of a 24-hour diner, scribbling on a napkin that smelled faintly of grease and coffee. I remembered sending the frantic, jubilant email to Marcus, my editor. The subject line was simply, Eureka. His reply 5 minutes later, you did it, Arya. You always do, Marcus. He was the only one. He'd been my editor since before Gemma was even in the picture. He had discovered my first unpublished manuscript in a slush pile years ago. It was a dark, literary fantasy that nobody wanted to buy. Too dense, they said, too complex. But Marcus had seen something. He fought for me, but the sales team wouldn't budge. A year later, he had called me with a proposition. The publisher had a deal with Gemma, a mid-level celebrity whose star was fading. She had a massive social media following but the writing talent of a houseplant. They wanted to launch her as a novelist, to rebrand her. They had the face, the platform, the marketing muscle. They just needed a book. They needed a soul. They needed me. Marcus had presented it as a stepping stone. He said, Arya, I know this isn't the dream, but it's a paycheck. It's experience. Do this, prove you can write a bestseller, and then we'll have the leverage to get your own work published. He sounded so convincing. I was broke, desperate, and tired of rejection letters. So I said yes. I became the ghost. The contract was a cage of ironclad clauses and non-disclosure agreements. It was a masterwork of legal artistry, designed to make me disappear. I was a writer for hire. My work was the property of the publisher, to be used and credited as they saw fit. My name appeared nowhere. The checks cleared, and my own dreams got packed away in a dusty corner of my hard drive. The first book was a hit. Gemma was a surprisingly good actress. She learned the key plot points. She adopted a persona of a reclusive genius, and the public bought it completely. After the success, I went back to Marcus. I asked him, is it time? Can we talk about my book now? He looked tired. He said, not yet, Arya. They want a series. The momentum is too strong. Just one more. Then we'll have them. It was always one more. After the second book, The Shadow Orchid, became a runaway bestseller. Gemma's ego, which was already considerable, inflated to the size of a hot air balloon. She started to believe her own press. The lines between the role she was playing and the person she was began to blur. We had editorial meetings. The publisher, Marcus, Gemma, and me. though I was only ever present via a speakerphone, my voice a disembodied presence in a lavish boardroom I was not welcome in. Gemma would talk about the characters as if she knew them. She'd make suggestions that were so nonsensical, so completely at odds with the world I had built, that I would have to spend hours, days, carefully writing my way around her terrible ideas, while making it seem like I was incorporating her vision. Marcus would act as the mediator, translating her garbled pronouncements into something actionable for me, and translating my carefully constructed plot points into simple sound bites for her. It was a farce. I remember one call in particular. We were discussing a pivotal scene in The Crimson Bloom. Gemma insisted that the main character, a quiet, methodical botanist named Alistair, should suddenly reveal he was a master swordsman. I tried to explain, as gently as I could, that for the past 2.5 books, Alistair had shown no aptitude for or interest in violence. His entire character was built on his intellect and his connection to the natural world. Her response, piped through the tinny speaker, was sharp. She said, "Well, I'm getting bored of him, and if I'm bored, the readers will be bored. Let's give him a sword." I was speechless. It was like someone suggesting that in the middle of Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth Bennet should pull out a machine gun. Marcus jumped in. He said, "That's an interesting thought, Gemma. A very dynamic impulse. What if we channel that desire for action not into a literal sword, but a metaphorical one? What if Alistair's secret weapon is a rare, deadly plant he's cultivated? A biological sword, if you will." Gemma was silent for a moment, then said, "Fine, as long as it's deadly." After the call, Marcus sent me a private email. All it said was, "I'm sorry, you're a magician for making this work." That was the pattern. She would throw a wrench in the gears, and I would have to rebuild the engine while it was still running. And with each book, her contributions became more bizarre, her understanding of the story more tenuous, while her public ownership of it became more absolute. I stayed because of Marcus's promises. I stayed because the money meant I didn't have to worry about rent for the first time in my adult life. But mostly, I stayed because I couldn't bear to let my world, my Alistair, my midnight garden, be ruined by her ignorance. I was its secret guardian. The memory of that phone call of the swords incident solidified something in me as I stood there in my apartment, holding her book. The calm in my bones was hardening. It was turning from a quiet peace into a cold resolve. My phone buzzed again. It was Marcus. This time he'd written a message. It said contract is up for renewal in 30 days. Her team is asking for a 4-book extension. The publisher is preparing an offer for you. Same terms. I stared at the message. Same terms. 4 more books. 4 more years in the shadows. 4 more years of being the typist. I thought about the interview. I thought about her laugh. I thought about the word, typist. It wasn't an insult anymore. It was a key. It was the catalyst. The despair I should have felt, the rage, the grief, it all transmuted into something else. Something clean and sharp. A single, perfect, and diamond-hard thought. No, not just no. Never again. I placed the shadow orchid back on the shelf, carefully aligning its spine with the others. I looked at the 3 of them, a monument to my invisibility, and I realized it wasn't about revenge. It was never about destroying her. It was about justice. It was about claiming what was mine, my stories, my name, my future. The contract was up in 30 days, 30 days to dismantle an empire she thought was hers. But that was built on a foundation of my words. 30 days to prepare for a war she didn't even know was coming. I walked back to my laptop, opened it, and began to type. But this time, I wasn't writing her story. I was writing mine. The plan didn't arrive in a flash of inspiration. It had been growing in the dark, a dormant seed planted years ago, long before Gemma ever called me a typist. It was a contingency, a just-in-case, a parachute I'd been weaving thread by thread in the quiet hours when I wasn't building her world. True foresight isn't about predicting the future. It's about understanding the present so deeply that the future's path becomes obvious. And the present was this. I was an invisible asset, and invisible assets are by their very nature disposable. I knew this day would come. I just didn't know what form the final betrayal would take. After the second book, when the fame had clearly gone to Gemma's head and my promises from the publisher remained empty, I stopped being a hopeful partner and became an architect of my own exit. It began with a simple act of digital hygiene. I bought a new external hard drive, a solid-state one, small enough to fit in my pocket. On this drive, I saved a copy of everything, not just the final manuscripts I submitted to the publisher, but every single draft, every outline, every brainstorming document filled with half-formed ideas and frantic scribbles, every email exchange with Marcus, where he would praise my magic and apologize for Gemma's input. But the real key, the heart of my entire strategy, was the way I saved the first chapter of the very first book, The Silent Seed. The official version, the one on the publisher's servers, was a clean, polished document, but on my secret drive, I had the original, the true original, a Microsoft Word file time-stamped from 4 years ago, a year before Gemma's deal was even announced. The file wasn't just the text, it was a digital fossil record of creation. It had my name in the document properties as the author. It had the track changes feature still active from my initial self-editing, showing sentences being born, reshaped, and deleted. It had my own comments in the margins, little notes to myself like, "Is this motivation strong enough?" or "Foreshadow the silver locket here." The file name itself was a piece of evidence. MG1_chapter, 1_ aria_draft _v0, 1.docs. It was the digital equivalent of a signed and dated masterpiece hidden beneath a cheap forgery. It was irrefutable. It was the truth, encrypted and waiting. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to my agent, Eleanor. Eleanor was a shark who looked like a librarian. She had sharp eyes, a sharper mind, and a complete lack of patience for corporate nonsense. She had negotiated my original ghostwriting contract, and had hated every second of it. She'd warned me, "Aria, they're buying your talent but renting your silence. The rent is high now, but silence gets cheaper over time." She was right. I called her the morning after the interview. I didn't even have to explain. She'd already seen the clip. Her first words to me were, "So, are we done playing nice?" I told her everything. About the hard drive, the original files, the years of documentation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint clinking of what I imagined was a very expensive teacup. Then she said, "Aria, my dear, you haven't just been writing novels. You've been building a case." Excellent. Eleanor became the general of my quiet war. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about leverage, timing, and narrative control. It wasn't about being angry. It was about being strategic. She said, "The first rule of a coup is that you don't announce it. You simply change who's in charge. Gemma and her publisher think they have the power because they have the brand. You have the origin story. In the world of art and ideas, the origin story is the only thing that truly matters." Our plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, the silent preparation. Phase 2, the controlled detonation. Phase 3, the new foundation. Phase 1 was already largely complete, thanks to my years of paranoia, but we refined it. Eleanor advised me to register my own author domain name immediately, under a private registration, so no one could trace it back to me. I bought ariasterling.com. It was a blank white page, a digital void waiting for a voice. She also had me engage a specialist in intellectual property law, a man named Mr. Klein, who operated with the quiet discretion of a priest in a confessional. He reviewed my original contract. He confirmed that while the publisher owned the copyright to the published works, the ownership of my pre-existing unpublished drafts was a legal gray area. He called it creative debris. He said, "They bought the house, Miss Sterling, but they may not have bought the blueprints. The blueprints could prove who the architect was." He found a clause, buried deep in the contract, about authorial integrity. It was a standard, almost meaningless bit of boilerplate that said the publisher couldn't alter the work in a way that would damage the author's reputation. Eleanor latched onto this. She said, Whose reputation? Mr. Klein. The credited author, Gemma, or the actual author, Arya? If we prove Gemma is incapable of writing a grocery list, let alone a novel, one could argue that attaching her name to Arya's work is in itself an act of damaging its integrity. It was a brilliant, debatable piece of legal jujitsu. It was plausible enough to be a threat. It was designed to make them hesitate, to make a lawsuit seem like a very, very bad idea. The final piece of Phase 1 was my own book. For the past year, in the hours I wasn't writing for Gemma, I had been working on a novel that was purely mine. It was called The Glassmaker's Daughter. It was a story I'd had in my head since before The Midnight Gardener ever existed. It was better than the Gardner books. It was deeper, sharper, more personal. It was my soul on the page, without any of Gemma's ridiculous suggestions about swords. I sent the manuscript to Eleanor. She read it in one night and called me at 7 a.m. She said, "This is it, Arya. This isn't a stepping stone. This is a monument. Forget the old publisher. I'm taking this out to the market." Now the plan shifted. It wasn't just about getting credit for the old work anymore. It was about using the old work as a launchpad for the new. Phase 2, the controlled detonation, hinged on my ally network. It was a small network, but it was solid. My primary, if unwitting, ally was Marcus. I knew he was trapped. He had a mortgage, a family, and a career he'd built brick by brick at that publishing house. He couldn't openly defy them, but his conscience was my secret weapon. I sent him a simple email. I wrote, "Marcus, thank you for everything over the years. My contract is up in 2 weeks, and as I'm sure you've heard, I will not be renewing. I have decided to pursue my own work." I attached the first 3 chapters of The Glassmaker's Daughter. I knew he would read it, and I knew, as a man who truly loved books, he would recognize its worth. I didn't ask him for anything. I didn't need to. I was planting a seed of dissent. I was showing him there was a better world, a world where authors were valued, not hidden. His reply came a day later. It was one sentence. "This is magnificent, Arya." That's all I needed. He was now a conscientious objector within the enemy camp. He wouldn't actively sabotage them, but he would no longer actively save them from their own folly. The final piece of the plan was the website, aryasterling.com. Eleanor and I designed it to be simple, elegant, and devastating. It would have a bio, a photograph of me, the first one I'd ever had taken professionally, and an announcement about my upcoming debut novel, The Glassmaker's Daughter, complete with the name of the new publisher who was about to give me a life-changing multi-book deal. And it would have one other thing, a blog post, a single post, titled "A Note on the Creative Process." In that post, I would calmly and factually explain my role as the ghostwriter for the Midnight Gardener series. I wouldn't be emotional or angry. I would frame it as setting the record straight, and at the bottom of the post, there would be a link. A single link that would say, "Download the original, unedited first chapter of The Silent Seed here." The link would lead to a PDF of that fossil record, the document with my name, my track changes, my notes, the undeniable, unequivocal proof, the blueprint. We timed it perfectly. Eleanor went to war. She took The Glassmaker's Daughter to every major publisher in the city, except my old one. She didn't just sell the book. She sold the story of the brilliant ghost behind the celebrity. It was a story too juicy to resist. A bidding war started. While Gemma's team was blithely negotiating a 4-book extension for a series whose author was about to publicly abdicate, I was in Eleanor's office, watching offers flood in that were 5, then 10 times what I had ever been paid for my silence. It wasn't about the money, it was about the validation. The number was a symbol. It was the market screaming that my name, Arya Sterling, was worth more than Gemma's face. I signed a 3-book deal with one of the most respected publishers in the world. The announcement was slated to go out in a trade magazine in 1 week. My website would go live the same day. The detonation was armed and ready. All I had to do was wait for the clock to run down. My contract with the old publisher officially expired on a Friday. On Saturday morning I woke up, made coffee, and sat at my laptop. With Eleanor on the phone, I pressed a single button, AryaSterling.com went live. The silent preparation was over. The first move of the takeover had been made. There was no explosion, no shouting, just the quiet click of a button, sending a ripple across the digital world that was about to become a tsunami. I took a sip of my coffee. It was the best I'd ever tasted. The first 24 hours were silent, eerily so. It was the calm before the storm, the deep breath the world takes before a hurricane makes landfall. My website was live. The blog post was up. The PDF of the original chapter was downloadable by anyone in the world. Eleanor had sent the link to a handful of key journalists and book bloggers with a simple note. Thought you might find this interesting. We didn't push. We didn't hype. We simply opened the door and let the truth walk out on its own. I spent that Saturday compulsively refreshing the page, watching the visitor counter tick up. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The PDF was being downloaded at an astonishing rate. It was like watching a fuse burn, knowing it was connected to a powder keg. The first tremor came on Sunday afternoon. It wasn't a public explosion, but a private message. It was from Marcus. It was a single cryptic sentence sent from his personal email address to mine. The crimson bloom just hit the fan. I smiled. That was all the confirmation I needed. I could picture the scene perfectly. Some junior marketing person, scrolling through book blogs on a lazy Sunday, saw a link. They clicked. They read my post. Their blood ran cold. They forwarded it to their boss. The boss forwarded it to their boss. A chain reaction of panic. A digital fire climbing the corporate ladder, one frantic email at a time. The quiet of their weekend had been shattered. I imagined Gemma, probably at brunch, blissfully unaware that the foundation of her entire literary career was currently being emailed around the publishing world as a PDF attachment. The public explosion happened on Monday morning. The most influential book columnist in the country, a woman named Sharon Gable, whose opinions could make or break a book, ran it as her lead story. The headline was devastatingly simple. The Ghost in the Garden. The article was a masterpiece of controlled demolition. It laid out the facts, my blog post, Gemma's typist comment, and the undeniable proof of the downloadable chapter. Gable didn't just report it. She analyzed the PDF itself. She wrote, "Here, we see not the work of a typist, but the intricate, messy, and brilliant process of creation itself. The deleted sentences are as telling as the final ones. The marginalia is a window into a first-rate literary mind at work. This is not a manuscript. It is an artifact of authorship." She ended the piece with a killer line. "It appears the Midnight Gardener series has one final shocking plot twist, and it's the best one yet." That article was the signal flare. By noon, it was everywhere. Every entertainment news site, every literary journal, every gossip blog. #Ghost in the Garden was trending on Twitter. The comments sections were a war zone. Gemma's fans were in denial, calling me a liar, a fame-hungry nobody. But their voices were drowned out by the sheer weight of the evidence. People were posting screenshots of the PDF, circling my name in the document properties, highlighting my notes in the margins. It was a crowdsourced forensic investigation, and the verdict was unanimous. I was the author. Gemma was the actress. The narrative I had so carefully constructed was taking hold, not because I was shouting it, but because the proof was quiet, factual, and undeniable. Then the press release for my new book deal dropped. Eleanor had timed it to the minute. Just as the world was asking, "Who is Arya Sterling?" we answered. The announcement wasn't just about my debut novel, The Glassmaker's Daughter. It explicitly mentioned my work on the Midnight Gardener series. My new publisher, a powerhouse in the industry, was publicly backing my claim. They weren't afraid of a lawsuit, because we had built a fortress of truth. This wasn't just a disgruntled ex-employee anymore. This was a validated author, with a major new deal, backed by a competing house. The story shifted from a he said she said to a David and Goliath narrative, and everyone knew who Goliath was. The panic on the other side must have been seismic. I got my second message from Marcus late Monday afternoon. It was longer this time. They're in lockdown. Legal is crawling all over everything. Gemma is screaming at everyone. They tried to get your website taken down for copyright infringement. I believe your lawyer already sent them a polite reply. He was right. Eleanor had been waiting for it. Mr. Klein had a cease and desist letter of his own, pre-written and ready to go. It cited the creative debris theory and the authorial integrity clause, and politely suggested that any legal action on their part would result in a discovery process that would be profoundly embarrassing for the publisher and its client. It was a checkmate. They could sue me, and in doing so, legally compel me to produce even more evidence of my authorship in a public court. Or they could do nothing and let the story burn itself out. They chose to do nothing. It was the only move they had left. Gemma's silence was the most damning thing of all. Her normally vibrant social media feeds, a constant stream of curated photos and self-congratulatory posts, went dark. Not a single post, not a single comment. The actress had forgotten her lines. Without a script written by me, she had nothing to say. Her fans were begging for a response, and their pleas were met with a digital void. Her celebrity was built on the illusion of authenticity, and that illusion had been shattered into a million pieces. The typist had turned off the machine. By the end of the week, the narrative was set in stone. I was the secret genius. Gemma was the fraud. Her publisher was the villain. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, a quiet observer of the storm I had unleashed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying for 3 long years. I had taken back my name. I had taken back my stories. It was never about revenge. It was about correction. I had simply corrected the record. And now, the world was seeing the truth. The takeover wasn't loud or violent. It was a silent, bloodless coup, executed with a single blog post and a single PDF. The throne had been empty all along. I had just finally walked up and sat in it. The real work, my work, the glassmaker's daughter, was about to begin, and for the first time my name would be on the cover. The power shift didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened in the court of public opinion, and the verdict was swift and brutal. The first major sign was the client exodus, or in my case, the reader exodus. Pre-order numbers for Gemma's supposed 4th book, the one that never even had a first sentence written, plummeted. Retailers started canceling their bulk orders. The Midnight Gardener series, once a golden goose for the publisher, was now radioactive. Fans felt betrayed, not just by Gemma, but by the publisher who had knowingly sold them a lie. Bookstores began quietly moving the existing trilogy from the front displays to the back shelves, a quiet shaming that was more damning than any press release. Then came the awards committees. The Silver Quill, the prestigious award Gemma had flaunted in her interview, announced they were reviewing the eligibility of the Crimson Bloom. It was polite corporate speak for we're about to strip her of the award. The humiliation was exquisite. The very trophy she had used to mock me was about to be publicly revoked. It was a perfect, ironic justice, the kind you couldn't write in a novel, because it would feel too contrived. Yet here it was, happening in real time. Gemma's desperate counter came a week after my website went live. It wasn't a public statement. It was a private email, from her, the first she had ever sent me directly. The subject line was simply, "Call me." The body of the email was her personal cell number. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me was curious, wanting to hear the panic in her voice. But Eleanor's advice echoed in my head. Never engage with a drowning person. They'll just pull you under with them. I didn't reply. I just deleted the email. My silence was a far more powerful statement than any conversation we could possibly have. 2 days later, the official offer came from her publisher. It was an email to Eleanor, a frantic attempt to put the genie back in the bottle. It was everything I had ever wanted. 3 years too late. They offered me a new contract, a co-author credit on all past and future Midnight Gardener books. My name would be on the cover, albeit under Gemma's. They offered me a staggering financial package, triple what they had paid me before, and they offered me a separate 2-book deal for my own work, to be published under their literary imprint. It was a king's ransom, offered in a moment of sheer desperation. They weren't trying to reward me. They were trying to buy my silence, to fold my story back into their brand, to control the narrative once more. Eleanor and I discussed it over the phone. She was laughing. She said, "It's a surrender document disguised as an offer letter." They're terrified. They know their entire fantasy division is built on a series whose author now belongs to their biggest competitor. I asked her what our response should be. Her reply was cool and precise. "No response is a response, Arya. We are in a position of power now. We don't need to negotiate with yesterday's problem." I agreed, so we ignored them. The silence from our end was, I imagine, maddening for them. They had no leverage. Their only asset, the author of their best-selling series, was not only gone but had become the architect of their public humiliation. The final, pathetic countermove came from Gemma's legal team. They sent a blustering letter threatening a lawsuit for breach of contract and tortious interference. It was a transparent bluff. Mr. Klein, my lawyer, replied with a 2-sentence letter. It read, "We welcome the opportunity for a public discovery process to fully adjudicate the authorship of the works in question. We are confident it will be a most illuminating experience for all involved." They never wrote back. The threat of having Gemma put on a witness stand and asked basic questions about the books, like a character's name or a major plot point, was a nuclear deterrent. They knew, as I knew, that she would be exposed as a complete and utter fraud under oath. The power had not just shifted, it had undergone a tectonic reversal. They were trapped. The very non-disclosure agreement they had used to cage me was now the thing preventing them from telling their side of the story without perjuring themselves. My silence had been a prison. Theirs was now a self-imposed exile. The vindication came not with a bang, but with a quiet, satisfying click. It was the sound of an article loading on my screen, a press release from my former publisher. The headline was short and to the point: "Publisher and Gemma Fay part ways." The text was corporate doublespeak about mutual agreement and pursuing new opportunities. It was a lie, but it was a lie that screamed the truth. She was fired. They had dropped their celebrity, their star, their golden goose, because she had become a liability they could no longer afford. They chose to amputate the limb to save the body. The empire built on my words had crumbled, and the empress had been dethroned. I read the article, closed my laptop, and felt a profound sense of peace. It was over. The final confrontation wasn't in a boardroom or a courtroom. It happened, of all places, in a small independent bookstore in my neighborhood. I was there to meet with the owner about a future event for the glassmaker's daughter. As I was leaving, the bell on the door chimed, and in she walked, Gemma. I almost didn't recognize her. The glamorous celebrity was gone. In her place was a woman who looked tired and small. Her hair wasn't perfect. She wore no makeup. She was just a person, stripped of the character she had been playing. She saw me, and for a moment her eyes widened in panic. Then something else took over, a flicker of her old arrogance. She walked towards me, her path blocking the door. She stopped a few feet away from me. "Arya," she said, her voice strained. "You ruined me." I stood there, calm, my new book manuscript tucked under my arm. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not even satisfaction. Just a quiet finality. I said, "No, Gemma, I didn't ruin you. I just stopped propping you up." She flinched as if I'd struck her. She opened her mouth to say something else, something probably sharp and cruel, but no words came. What could she say? I had the one thing she never did, the truth. And then I remembered her words, the ones that started it all. So I gave them back to her. A final, quiet gift. I said, "The creative mind is everything, Gemma. You said it yourself." I then stepped around her and walked out the door, the bell chiming my departure. I never looked back. The news that my old publisher had dropped her was just the beginning. A few weeks later, Marcus sent me one last email from his corporate account. It was his resignation letter. In his personal note to me, he said, You didn't just build a new future for yourself, Arya. You reminded the rest of us that we could too. Thank you. He's now a senior editor at my new publisher. A talent like his doesn't stay unemployed for long. The new reality had settled. My debut novel, The Glassmaker's Daughter, launched to incredible reviews and even better sales. The publicity from the Midnight Gardener scandal had created a level of awareness no marketing budget could buy. Readers were curious about the real author, and they found a story that was deeper and more powerful than anything I had written before. My book was set to outsell her entire series combined. I was no longer a ghost. I was an author. My name, Arya Sterling, was on the cover, in big, bold letters. It was my story, my world, and my name in the spotlight, and the light didn't burn. It felt like coming home. So, what's the moral of this story? For a long time, I thought it was about revenge. I thought it was about tearing down someone who had wronged me. But standing here now, in my new reality, I see it differently. This was never about destruction. It was about construction. It was about building a space for myself, when the one I occupied became a prison. The world will constantly try to put you in a box, to give you a label. They'll call you a function, a typist, an assistant, a support system. They will try to make you a supporting character in your own life, and you can let them. For a while I did. I accepted the label because it was easier, because it was safer, because it paid the bills. But your value is not determined by the label someone else gives you. Your value is inherent. It's in your mind, in your skills, in the work you do when no one is watching. My victory wasn't the moment Gemma was fired. It wasn't even the moment my book hit the bestseller list. The real victory was that quiet moment, alone in my apartment, when I decided to stop being a ghost and start being an architect. The moment I chose to build my own house instead of begging for a room in someone else's. I didn't defeat Gemma by being louder, or angrier, or more vicious. I defeated her by being better, by being so undeniably good at what I do that her illusion couldn't stand up to the glare of my reality. The greatest revenge is not a loud explosion, but the quiet, undeniable hum of your own success, and that is a power that every single one of us holds. Maybe you're in a job where your boss takes credit for your ideas. Maybe you're in a relationship where you feel unseen. Maybe you're just tired of feeling like a typist in a world that celebrates the people who just sign their names to the work. Don't just get angry. Get strategic. Document your value. Build your alliances. And most importantly, build your own thing, your own project, your own skill, your own future that belongs to you and you alone. Be so good they can't ignore you, but be so smart they can't erase you. This whole journey has taught me that the story you tell about yourself is the most important one you'll ever write. So make sure you're the author, not just a character. And if you've ever felt like this, if you've ever had to fight to claim your own story, I want you to know you are not alone. Let me know your story in the comments below. Sharing our experiences is how we build our own power. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button for more stories about turning the tables and taking back what's yours. Thank you for listening.